Hey YouTube, welcome back to Cross the Ditch NC. My name is Laura. I'm so glad you joined me today. Just wanted to build on our very first video and give you a little bit of information about me and then give you a tour of our garden. Once again, my name is Laura. I grew up on a small farm in the southeastern part of North Carolina. After I got married, we relocated to the northeastern part of the state where we began to grow our family. When we located here, we lived here for about 2 or 3 years, and I kind of got the garden itch, I guess you could say. I really missed having those fresh from the garden vegetables. Fast forward to Mother's Day about 5 or 6 years ago, and my husband decided to build me 4 raised garden beds in the backyard that measured 4 foot by 8 foot. I was ecstatic and went straight away to planting. This is the first time my husband had ever had radish, because radish are like my favorite vegetables ever. First time my husband had ever had a fresh from the garden radish, and he couldn't get over how spicy they were. Fast forward about 2 years, and I wanted to expand our garden a little bit more, but we had limited space once again because we live in the city limits. So I stocked up on some nursery pots and began to plant some different fruits and vegetables in the pots. My husband really recognized how much I enjoyed gardening. I love growing food, and honestly, just the quality of having fresh from the backyard food. So this year, he actually built me 2 more garden beds. And in those garden beds, we have been able to grow enough fresh food to feed our family during the summer and also preserve some for the winter time. Also this year, my neighbor was gracious enough to allow us to plant a garden in his yard. He had a garden in his yard for years, decided not to do it this year, but offered it to us. So we also have a tilled garden in our neighbor's yard. One of my favorite things about having a garden in our backyard, aside from having fresh fruits and vegetables all year long, is it's a good way for our family to spend time together. I'll get the kids to come outside and help me tend the garden, prune, pull weeds, pick the veggies, and it's a great experience for them as well. Whether or not they decide to continue on and garden when they get older, I still think it's a great experience for them to learn how food grows and really where it does come from. Many people think that gardening requires a lot of time and upkeep, but it really doesn't. I work full-time. I also hold a part-time job outside of that, and when I get home in the evenings and then on the weekends, I spend maybe an hour a day in my garden. Once again, my kids are a huge help with that, but it really does not require a huge time commitment. It does take a little planning, and a little planning goes a long way into making sure you have a successful garden and also an easily manageable garden. Now, speaking of the garden, let me give you a quick tour of the garden on our property as well as the garden on our neighbor's property that we tend. I will tell you to bear with me. Our garden is in a bit of a transition right now, transitioning from the summer garden to the fall garden. So I am in the process of cleaning out some dead and dying plants and letting the soil rest and preparing to replant them for our fall and winter garden, which I will show you our little setup on how we have our seedlings started. Also, some stuff you'll notice, like our sunflowers in the background and the dying tree limbs back here. We had a hurricane about a week and a half ago, so we are still in the process of doing some cleanup from that, and it did do a little bit of damage, but thankfully it was strictly to the garden and not to any structures. All right, so down the side of our house, we have a ton of tomato plants in pots. We have incredibly sandy soil here in northeastern North Carolina, and I have never been successful with getting tomatoes to grow very well in the dirt, tilled into the ground. But I have had tremendous success with them growing in pots. These tomato plants are looking a little rough as far as being tied up because, once again, when the hurricane came through, it kind of tore them down a little bit. This is our potato basket. I built it out of chicken wire. I am all about DIY, doing things on the cheap. We actually had red potatoes planted in here earlier in the year, which we have harvested, and it did a tremendous job of growing those potatoes, but now we have sweet potatoes growing in there, and that is the vine that is essentially taking over everything. We also have watermelons planted in here. These are sugar baby watermelons. I got these seeds from Haas Tools, and they have done beautifully this year. We've harvested about 5 watermelons so far, but there's, I think, 3 more on this plant, and then we have another plant in the big garden. But as you can see, we have tomatoes going all down the side of the house. In these pallets, earlier in the year before it got too hot, we had lettuce and radish growing in them. But anyone who knows Eastern North Carolina, or just North Carolina in general, knows we have had some really hot days these past few weeks, so the radish did not do too well and ended up bolting. So I pulled them and fed them to our chickens. Down the side of the chicken coop, I have some rosemary planted that I actually transplanted from a plant in our front yard. And then we have okra growing down the side of our chicken coop. This is an area we're still trying to get put back together because of the storm that came through a few weeks ago. We had to take down all of our potted plants and tuck them where hopefully they wouldn't get blown over by the wind. But we have artichokes, basil, some eggplant, some more tomato plants, and there's more tomatoes and basil down there, as well as some citronella. This is growing on our back patio. That's why I say it doesn't matter where you live, even if you have 2 or 3 steps in front of your home or your apartment, or you have a small balcony, you can grow food for you and for your family using a method just like this. Just put them in some pots, give them some water and some sunshine, and watch them grow. This is our backyard garden. This is what kind of started everything. It consists of the 4 original 4x8 beds that my husband built me, plus one that he built me the next year, and then the 2 beds that he built this year. We have some pallets that I use as platforms. Over here, my dill has gone to seed and dried up. However, we have some peppers and some tomatoes growing here, as well as some kale, and that pallet has cucumbers growing out of it, trailing up the fence. Once again, my garden is in a bit of a transition, and there are weeds that I need to pull, but I am 100% about being real with you. This garden bed's pretty empty. Got to pull some weeds. I'm getting ready to transition some cauliflower seedlings and broccoli seedlings into it. However, we still have a bunch of cayenne pepper plants, or a cayenne pepper plant that is producing a bunch of cayenne peppers, as well as a bunch of basil. I'll be doing a video soon on starting basil from seed, as well as propagating it, how to cook with it, and how to preserve it. I had some beans in this bed, but they have the heat just didn't do too good with them, so I have pulled them now and am preparing this bed for planting for the fall. We have some younger okra plants here that are just now starting to produce. This is, I'm gonna try to back up here. This is our noodle bean trellis. These are red Chinese noodle beans. They are delicious, as well as they look really pretty hanging from the trellis when you walk into the garden. We like to saute these with some soy sauce or honey, but I have also started to dry some. I'm gonna save some seeds this year from them, as well as see if I can save some seeds for cooking during the fall, maybe making some soups or something with, and then save some also for replanting next year. The back panel that you see here stretches the length of the garden. It's kind of blocked by the other plants right now, are our Kentucky pole beans. We planted these in the spring, and we get enough beans off of these between the spring and the fall to can to feed our family, and also to can and preserve for the winter time. I averaged, when this was producing pretty hardy before the heat got to it, I was averaging about 7 to 8 cans a week on these. So they are very prolific producers, and they do good, and now that temperatures are finally starting to cool off, they will start producing beans again, so we'll get a second harvest off of them. This bed has some rogue asparagus in it, as well as eggplants. This was a cucumber trellis. However, you can tell that cucumber plant is starting to die off. This one is still producing pretty well. These are my slicing cucumbers. I have some powdery mildew, which is pretty common here in eastern North Carolina with the heat and humidity the way it is, and I'll be sharing some ways that you can combat powdery mildew in your garden as well in an organic method. This back panel that you see, this is one of the new beds that my husband built me this year. This back panel, we also had the Kentucky pole beans on, but they had started dying off, so we pulled them, and I'm gonna plant some sugar snap peas up here this week. We do have a second round of squash and zucchini growing, so I'm excited for that. On the back side of this cucumber trellis, we have some more okra, because aside from radish, okra is one of my most favorite fruits from the garden. I love to eat it raw, and I love to saute it, I love to bake it, and I love it fried. We also have some pepper plants, and that right there is a ghost pepper plant, and I am hoping that we will get some good peppers off of it before the frost hits. This is another trellis that has cucumbers growing on it, as you can see. This one has produced really well and is continuing to throw off cucumbers. We have another eggplant here. I have these scattered about. We have Tabasco pepper plants and okra in this bed, as well as a bell pepper plant that I just harvested all the peppers off of yesterday, but we still have a few getting ready to start growing. Behind our garden, right along the ditch bank that Cross the Ditch came from, the name did, we have blueberry bush. This was a tiny transplant that my grandfather gave me from his yard several years ago, and it has done beautifully. We got a bunch of blueberries off of it this year. We also have a fig tree that my husband planted a couple of years ago that is doing great, and we will be harvesting soon. We also have a blackberry bush that has produced quite a bit of blackberries this year. However, it is still throwing off for us. Pretty cool shot of the garden from the back side of it. We used some fencing to create the panels for the Kentucky pole beans to grow up. One thing we love about it is it creates a little bit of a privacy fence for us. So when we're hanging out in the backyard, cooking out and stuff, we kind of feel like we're in our own little jungle oasis. We also have a bunch of sunflowers that are ready to be cut so we can save the seed for them. We save the seeds for eating and roasting, but we also save the seeds to have sunflower seeds for next year. Now we're going to take a little walk to my neighbor's house. He lives 2 houses over from me. He has a big, beautiful yard, and he and his wife planted a garden in the side of their yard for several years. However, this year they decided not to. He reached out to me, said, "Hey, would you like to plant the garden this year?" And I jumped on the opportunity. I was so excited. The garden was doing great, looking beautiful, and then when the storm came through about a week and a half ago, a huge tree branch broke off and flattened part of my okra. But once again, I am not mad about that, because things could have been much worse, and we are incredibly thankful. This garden had butter beans in it, as well as peas, and then you can see the okra growing there. The butter beans and peas have pretty much stopped producing at this point, so I'm in the process of pulling those plants and letting the soil rest so I can put some stuff in the garden for the fall and the winter. But look at all the okra. I come out here almost every single day and harvest this okra, because it's one thing that a lot of people don't realize with okra is it produces a lot, and it produces a lot every single day, so you have to cut it daily. And I get what I call a popcorn bowl to my kids, but I get a pretty hearty bowl of okra every day. It's enough to cook a meal for my family that night, and also freeze about 3 quart bags every single day. So we'll have plenty of okra for the winter time. And y'all, that's been daily for like the past 4 weeks. Here you see we've got some butter bean plants with a few little butter beans left. That will soon be ready. I gotta let them plump up just a little bit more. I also have my jalapeno peppers planted here. I'm gonna come down here in a minute after we finish with this video and pick those so I can make some pickled peppers this weekend if the rain don't get me, because it is starting to rain. Something new that we're growing this year, you can see on this tall panel, is cucumber melon. We have never had it before. I saw someone else on YouTube growing it, and the way they described it, it just sounded like it would be a really yummy treat. It looks like a tiny watermelon, but it tastes like a cucumber with a touch of the pickle taste, if that makes any sense. That's how it was described to me. We haven't had any mature yet to try ourselves, but we will definitely do a video on that when it comes around. And yes, there's more okra. Have I told you yet that I like okra? We also have a rogue watermelon plant that has decided to grow through the fence, but we're gonna let it grow. And if you're wondering why we have netting and fencing up around our gardens, is there are a lot of rabbits around here. We actually have deer that come into the city limits also, and we also have a lot of feral cats in the area that like to go into the garden and use it as a litter box, but they also like to eat some of the plants that we have in there. So we put the fence up to protect the garden a little bit. But that's what we call the big garden. This is the garden in my neighbor's house. We also have several fruit trees in our yard. This is a patio peach. It produces a very small peach that is really tart tasting. However, you can make preserves with it and sweeten it up some, and it is actually pretty delicious. We also have grapevines and raspberry vines growing down the side of the house. A new addition this year is our Granny Smith apple tree. So we're excited to watch it grow and can't wait to eat the fruit off of it. We also have an olive tree in our front yard. It hasn't got mature enough to start producing olives. However, in the next year or two, we should start getting some. We planted this last year. It was a little thing and has grown into this big thing. This is a peach tree. My husband and kids have loved it. I personally do not care for peaches. However, they have loved eating the fruit off of it. I also have these wooden crates that I have planted stuff in as well. I have chamomile in one of them. We have pumpkin growing out of one of them. Two of them had cucumbers in it. However, they have gone to the heat and are not doing too well anymore. And I have a pepper plant in one of them as well. We also have several potted plants in the front of our house, kind of tucked in behind the shrubbery and sitting on the front steps. However, it started raining, so I can't walk down in front of the house right now. However, I will show you where we have began planning and planting for our fall garden. Sitting right next to me is our grow table. This is just a regular folding table that has seed trays on it and has a grow light. My father-in-law gave us this grow light last year, and this is the first year that we have used it. However, these seedlings are about a week and a half old. Take a look at that. Broccoli and Brussels sprouts. Got cabbage, cauliflower, dill, all sorts of goodies in there. That one, just ignore that little guy. That little guy wasn't under the grow lamp and it got leggy and ended up dying. That's why I recommend grow lights. This is different types of lettuce. Also have rutabagas and a second round of cucumbers. We've got just enough days left in our growing season that I think I can get another round of cucumbers in. We also have some more tomato plants as well. But this is our grow light setup that we put underneath the carport. Total cost for that, once again, the grow light was given to us, but the total cost for the setup, because we had to buy new bulbs for it and buy the table, was about $50. You can honestly do this on the cheap, and I'm going to share a video in the future on how to do it for a lot cheaper. So that's pretty much our gardens and our grow operation. Like I said, it's nothing big, it's nothing fancy, but we do get enough food here in town to feed our family and share with our neighbors during the summertime and the fall, as well as enough to preserve for the wintertime. This will be our first year doing a fall garden, so I'm excited to share that adventure with you, and I'm hoping that we can get enough food once again, feed our family, share with our neighbors, and to preserve for later on in the year when it does get a little bit too cold for stuff to grow. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you will come back each week and check on our new videos. I plan to do at least one video a week, hopefully more, but I hope you'll come back and join me. Thank you again, and I hope you have a blessed day.